Ultramar held against all manners of invaders, some so strange as to defy the comprehension of the common man. The Ultramarines have tested their might against Orc wars and renegade uprisings, Tau incursions, and Necron raids, but the measure of their heroism is shown truest in battles where they have defended the galaxy itself in the face of threats from beyond known space. So did the Sons of Ultramar prove in the 35th millennium in battle against the Star Striders of Kreoth and in retaliation for the Heavenfall massacres. But of all these terrible wars and heroic struggles, there is one conflict that stands above all others: the onset of Tyranid High Fleet Behemoth and the battle for Macragge. Upon learning the threat posed to Ultramar by High Fleet Behemoth, Marnez Calgar at once drew his plans. Deeming Macragge to be the system most immediately threatened, Calgar ordered its formidable defenses to be further improved. A dozen warships already hung in orbit, and each day more arrived from the warp. Massively beweaponed strike cruisers cast shadows over civilian vessels and Imperial Navy destroyers, and were themselves dwarfed by the brooding presence of the Ultramarines' battle barges. Between this mighty fleet of warships and the planet's no less formidable orbital defense stations, Macragge was anything but defenseless. Scant weeks later, the Outrider vessels of the Tyranid fleet attacked Macragge. The alien bio-vessels swept aside attacks by Ultramarine strike cruisers and swarmed over the planet below. Soon, many thousands of spore-birth beasts scurried and rampaged across Macragge. Deeming that the Tyranid threat was too massive to be opposed piecemeal, Calgar combined his ground forces into three mighty armies. The primary and secondary task forces, composed largely of 1st Company veterans and Ultramar planetary defense forces, bolstered Macragg's polar fortresses against the Tyranid onslaught. Meanwhile, Calgar's task force, the largest of the three, performed a series of rearguard actions, attempting to slow the Tyranid advance and eliminate hive control organisms. Calgar achieved great success in the early days of the campaign, buying time with blood for his battle brothers to the north and south. However, the Tyranids kept coming. In a final climactic battle on Cold Steel Ridge, the Ultramarines' rearguard were brutalized by the Tyranid horde, and Calgar himself gravely wounded. Knowing that to remain planetside was to doom his followers to wasteful death, Calgar withdrew to the orbiting battle barge, Octavius. Refusing all but the most vital medical attention, the master of Macragge took command of the fleet and sought a way to save his world from certain destruction. Hours later, the main Tyranid fleet arrived at Macragge. With no sign of reinforcements, Calgar led his fleet in a series of daring attacks, striking at isolated vessels as they spread out to invade Macragge in force. Caught between the blistering firepower of Macragg's polar fortresses and the vengeful hammer blows of Calgar's fleet, Tyranid vessels were destroyed by the score, but many more yet remained. As battle raged, the Tyranids unleashed thousands of spores above the vital polar fortresses. If the fortresses were taken, Macragg's guns would be silenced and the world left defenseless. So it was that the Tyranids landed in even greater numbers than before, and the fortresses soon found themselves sorely beset. Their gruesome cargo delivered, the battered hive ships retreated from orbit. Trusting to his Ultramarines to keep the fortress secure, Calgar relentlessly pursued the Tyranid fleet, determined that it would not bring ruin to the other worlds. Never before or since has the valor of the Ultramarines been tested as it was in the defense of the polar fortresses. The veteran Space Marines of the 1st Company led the lightly armed auxilia in a tenacious defense of the fortresses, holding every wall and trench until the last possible moment before it was overrun by the Tyranid swarm. Slowly, the troops withdrew even deeper into the fortress, while making the Tyranids pay for every single yard of ground they advanced. The Titans of Legio Praetor stalked the ice fields and drove smoking furrows through the on-rushing Tyranid hordes with shells and plasma. The ferocity of the swarms was unbelievable. At the northern fortress, they overran the walls by using the steaming piles of their own dead for cover. Titans were dragged down and ripped apart by sheer weight of numbers. The defenders' gun barrels glowed red-hot and jammed in spite of the Arctic cold. Ammunition began to run low, though the fortresses contained stockpiles for months of siege. Yet still the defenders fought on. Lumbering scythe-armed carnifexes tore into the defenders' bastions like living battering rams, smashing their way through metal and rock-ribbed walls with equal fury. The Ultramarines had to rely on heavy short-range firepower to bring down the foe, but for each Tyranid that fell, another three sprang forward to continue the fight. Lesser men were paralyzed with terror as the Tyranids broke through the perimeter again and again, but the Ultramarines never despaired and never gave thought to defeat. Calgar pursued the Tyranid fleet toward the ringed world of Cirque, at the edge of the Macragge system. The timely arrival of the Tempestus fleet from Bacca finally sealed the Tyranids' fate by catching them in a vice between the two fleets. Even now, the Imperial fleet was overmatched, for the Tyranids were too many. The battle would have been lost save for the heroic sacrifice of the Dominus Astra. Charging into the heart of the High Fleet, the huge Emperor-class battleship detonated its warp drives, creating a vortex that dragged both it and the entire Tyranid fleet to oblivion. With the High Fleet destroyed, Calgar's surviving ships came about and roared back to Macragge to try to save the beleaguered polar garrisons. The survivors of the Ultramarines' first company were believed still to be fighting amongst the defense laser silos of the northern citadel, but all contact with them had been lost after the Tyranids overran the surface outposts. Calgar, feeling that the situation was becoming critical, sent the 3rd and 7th Ultramarines companies ahead in their fast strike cruisers, while his remaining damaged ships limped back to Macragge. The Space Marines of the 3rd and 7th Companies deployed onto the poles by drop pod, their supporting units following up in Thunderhawk gunships. Scenes of unbelievable carnage awaited them below. Piles of mangled Tyranid corpses and shattered war gear lay strewn across the ice. Vast steaming craters pocketed the snows where Titan plasma reactors had gone critical. The stench of death lay everywhere. The 7th Company landed unopposed at the southern fortresses and quickly linked up with the survivors of the garrison above ground. Together, they pushed on to clear the subterranean passages that the Tyranids have overrun. In the north, the 3rd Company came under attack as soon as it landed. Hundreds of creatures emerged from dark tunnel mouths and shattered bunkers to assail the Space Marines. Only staunch fire laid down by the company's Devastator squads kept the alien swarm at bay until Thunderhawk gunships arrived to blast the Tyranids back into the darkness. Captain Fabian of the 3rd Company prudently awaited the arrival of the company's 3 dreadnoughts before proceeding into the fortress itself to search for survivors. The dark, dank corridors beneath the northern fortress were already altered by the alien presence. Mucus dripped from the walls and ceilings, and a pervasive, musky stench filled the air. Alien screams and roars echoed and reverberated along the tunnels. The Space Marines pushed onward into the corridors littered with Tyranid and Ultramarines dead, the darkness reluctantly receding before their suit lights. Chameleoid lictors lay in ambush amongst the corpses, slashing into the advanced squads in an orgy of destruction. Eventually, the forward squads used flamers to burn their way along the passages and flush out their enemy. Even as fire consumed them, the creatures still leapt forward with claws outstretched to rend and slay. Through darkness and terrors unimaginable, the 3rd Company finally reached the lower Penetorium, where the defenders had made their last stand. Tyranid bodies were piled 6 deep around the doors, and within the room a circle of Terminators lay where they had fought back to back. Each had given his life for his brothers. The Ultramarines' first company had been wiped out to the last man. The battle for Macragge remains a great source of both sorrow and pride for the Ultramarines. The name of its fallen are commemorated each year of the Feast of Days, their sacrifice remembered throughout Ultramar with honor and gratitude. But the cost had been great. The Ultramarines' first company was gone, and the 3rd and 7th sorely diminished. It would be many long years before the chapter could properly replace its losses, but replace them it would. The Ultramarines would endure.